Hi, I'm Erica Pfometer, granddaughter of Walter Gropius, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. In our continuing series, Children of Genius, we have a first. Francesca Breuer Wallace gives her first interview ever on her father, Marcel Breuer, and later we'll meet the grandson of Aino and Alvar Aalto. His name is Heikki Aalto-Alanen, and he's got a new book about their work and relationship, entitled Aino and Alvar Aalto, A Life Together. Now, if you ever wanted to be hip back in the 60s or 70s among the architecture crowd, just one mention of the name Alvar Aalto, and that cocktail conversation would grow reverentially quiet as names of his important buildings in Finland got bandied about, mostly mispronounced. And now here's your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Thanks, Tom.
Thank you for having an easy-to-pronounce name.
Interviewing the sons, daughters, grandsons, granddaughters of the architects whose houses we love has been one of the best parts of producing U.S. Modernist Radio. We've had the pleasure of talking to Hick Stone, son of Edward Durrell Stone, John Barnes, son of Edward Larrabee Barnes, Ainsley Gorris Gilligan, daughter of one of the Harvard Five, Landis Gorris, Fred Noyes, son of another of the Harvard Five, Elliot Noyes, Eric and Susan Saarinen, children of Arrow, Raymond and Dion Neutra, children of Richard, grandchildren of Frank Lloyd Wright and Charles and Ray Eames, and children of Craig Elwood, Bill Cody, Charlie Gwathmey, Charlie Deaton, and many more. Does the apple fall too far from the tree? Well, in occupations, yes. Most of the children go into fields other than architecture, but modernism is always in their DNA. From children of the most famous architects to the children of local architects who only did a few modernist houses in their entire career, like my dad, there's no escaping generational influence. From furniture to art to clothing to travel to music and culture, the children of genius have a special place in their hearts for their dads and an occasional mom. As the expression goes, it was a different time. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Marcel Breuer studied at the Bauhaus in Germany and immigrated to the U.S. in 1937 to teach alongside Walter Gropius at Harvard. Along with Gropius, Breuer is considered to be one of the Jedi of modernism. Some of you, right now at this very moment, are sitting in Breuer chairs, which you might also call Cheska chairs. That model, which has been a bestseller for more than 50 years, is named for Breuer's daughter, Francesca Breuer Wallace. She grew up in New Canaan, Connecticut, in a house designed by her father, and by the late 1960s, she was appearing in ads for this famous chair, although, as we'll find out, not exactly willingly. She's never previously given an interview, but today she is ready to look back on her life and look forward to saving her family's house on Cape Cod. Here's George's conversation with Francesca Breuer Wallace.
Hi, Francesca. Thanks for talking to me.
Oh, you're welcome.
You know, I am so glad to hear that the Cape Cod Trust is going to be taking care of your family house in Wellfleet. That house has been around for a long time, hasn't it?
Yes, 70 years. I think it was built in the 40s, early 40s.
And you spent time there growing up?
Yes, from age 3 to late teens, I would say. But every summer, yes.
Every summer. And what was it like out there? Because this was a house that doesn't have the things that we're used to today, like it didn't have air conditioning. So what was it like to be there in the summers?
Summers were definitely very simple and quiet, which sometimes was a little boring for me.
Yeah, as a teenager, I guess.
Yeah. So we didn't have air conditioning in the Connecticut home either. So you don't miss it if you don't have.
If you don't have it.
You don't know what it is. So,
right.
Yeah. So summers were hot and muggy and thunderstorms. But, you also had the ponds and the beach was close by. You could walk to the beach. So it was very pretty and pleasant.
How did your father and other artists and architects of that time discover Wellfleet? I mean, I've been there, and it's still out of the way place.
I'm not sure how they found it because you just get off the freeway and you hit a dirt road and you just follow a dirt road all through the past ponds and all kinds of stuff like that. I mean, there's no road signs or maps or anything like that. But the Saarinen had a house out there. And so, maybe it was through just knowing other people who had discovered Wellfleet at the time.
Well, let's go back to how you came to this whole story. You were born in Europe, right?
I was born in Stuttgart, Germany, yes.
Okay. And how did you enter the Breuer family?
They were wanting to have another child. My mom had many miscarriages except for Tom. And so a friend of hers, actually, Ati Forberg, Ati Gropius, had adopted a child from Germany. And so they embarked on that and found me in an orphanage in Stuttgart.
How old were you at the time?
2.5.
2.5, okay. Do you remember anything about that, or is it still pretty hazy?
Not really. I mean, I had one little friend that I talked about named Gerhardt, and I remember birthdays where everybody sat on stools or something like that. But other than that, I probably just kind of wiped it out of my mind, I think.
And you came to America, what, about 56, 57, roughly?
June of 57. I just looked at my passport to see when it was. I thought it was 57.
On a ship, I think, right? Didn't you come on a ship?
No, airplane.
Airplane.
I was on the airplane with I was accompanied by some woman who brought me over.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming that architecture had not been a part of your orphanage life at all. So what was it like parachuting into this world with a well-known father architect?
Well, I don't think I realized that he was famous until I was quite a bit older. It was just my family. That's my only memory of a mother and her father are Marcel and Connie Breuer. So to me, it was just normal, I guess.
And where did you go to school? Where did you grow up in New Canaan? Did you go to one of the schools there?
Yeah. I just went to first a nursery school and then just the local elementary school and through 2 years of high school. And then I went to private school, 1 year in Gstaad, Switzerland. And then for my senior year, I came back and I went to school in Washington, Connecticut.
Okay. I remember from looking at your dad's obituary that you were in France at the time of this. Had you moved there after college?
Yes. I went over after college as an au pair.
Okay.
To work for the head of Flen, which was a ski resort that my father designed.
Yes, oh, sure.
And so I went there and met my first husband and had our son, Aaron.
Okay.
And then we moved back kind of just after he passed away.
Okay. And where did you move to?
Lake Tahoe.
Oh, the Lake Tahoe area. That's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How is it growing up in the Breuer household? I mean, I read that your dad traveled extensively, so it was mostly you and your mom?
Mostly, yes. When I was younger, it was mostly the two of us. And then as she got older and I got older and he got older, she would spend part of the week in New York.
Okay.
With him. His office was in Manhattan. And then I would have, a governess or whatever you want to call it, would stay with me for those 3 days.
You would have the run of the place, though, right?
I was a pretty good kid. I was never, I didn't like to get in trouble, so.
Now, was your brother Tom around with you then, or had he already left?
No, we really didn't grow up together at all because we're 11 years apart in age. And when I came to the States, I was 3 and he was 14. And they put him in private school in Putney, Vermont.
Okay.
Which was a new progressive school. So I kind of grew up like an only child because he just wasn't around that much. And then I don't even know where he went to high school, probably same place. And then he went away to college.
And what did he do in his career after that? Was he involved with the Breuer Industries at all?
No. Having had a European father, it was a lot of pressure on the male heir, shall we say, to be successful. And he did not do well with that pressure. So he dabbled in a lot of things, and he's extremely bright and talented, but never really found his niche. He did the Peace Corps and in Chad, Africa. He did that for a number of years, but I think it was just too much pressure for his personality. And then, of course, for me, you're a woman, you're a girl, you'll get married, you'll have a husband to take care of you. So there wasn't not that pressure put on me. So I think it was easier for me growing up than it was for him.
I've talked to a lot of children of architects, and one of the things they usually bring up is what happened around the dinner table. So what kind of things did you and your mom and dad talk about over dinner?
Well, for one thing, I knew whenever there was anything juicy to be talked about, they would speak in French.
Ah, okay.
So, so then I knew something good was going on.
Did that have you learn French more quickly?
Yes, I think so. It's like, I need to be in the loop here. So I don't remember any specific conversations. I think just normal family conversation, nothing stands out to me really in terms of a specific conversation. I don't really remember him talking about work per se, but maybe he did. It's a long time ago.
Right. How old were you when you began to realize that he was a special person in the architecture world and the people related to him different than, say, a typical dad?
Probably about 6th grade, 7th grade, something like that. Just that my world was very different from a lot of my friends and just who came to the house and just, how we lived. I got to travel, and then it started to kind of like, oh, okay, not everybody's like this, but.
So who came to the house? Who did you get to meet growing up?
Well, I remember always huge office parties. I.M.Pei, Zanti Shavinsky, Juri Kepish, Calder. Rufus Stillman was a huge friend.
Patron too, right?
Yeah, patron, friend. And they would come every summer. And I just remember them being a lot of fun. And especially summertime, I always loved it when we had company because it was so quiet for me otherwise.
Yeah.
Because my brother was never there. So it was just me.
You were just hanging out.
Just hanging out.
Did you have a period where you thought about architecture as a career for yourself?
No.
No?
Sadly, no.
Just not appealing?
No, I don't know. I don't think my brain works that way. So I wasn't a real studious person. So I don't think I could have gotten through all that schooling to be an architect.
I'm not an architect either, but I've found that architecture has seeped its way into my DNA, whether I like it or not.
Oh, absolutely.
Tell me how that's been for you.
I just think I'm appreciative of the more minimalistic look of things. A lot of people didn't like his buildings that were concrete and simple and that, but that's what I grew up with. So to me, I love that clean lines of a home and, not a lot of clutter. And so that's kind of followed me through my life.
Have you sought out houses like that, modernist houses to live in?
Not really, but we certainly would love to.
Yeah.
Yes. that's part of what got Gerald and I together too, because he was always very interested in modern architecture and all that kind of stuff. So that clicked with us, being on the same page with a lot of that.
Did you get to travel with your father to places?
A little bit. I started traveling with them when I was about 12, but most of the time he traveled alone because he had an office in Paris. So he went pretty regularly there and then all over the place. I didn't travel as much as I would have liked to, I think, with them. But part of that's just being in school and,
Sure.
You don't have the flexibility to just pick up and leave,
Right. Now, as an adult, did you ever find yourself visiting some of the places he designed?
Well, I mean, obviously the Whitney in New York.
Oh, yes.
Went many times. And
which is now going to be Sotheby's, I understand.
Yes, got bought out.
Yeah.
Not the Met Breuer anymore. And I know of a lot of places, but I haven't really been to them, I have to say. I would love to, but...
Well, are there any places in particular you'd like to go? Because we can see if we can make that happen for you.
I've always been intrigued by St. John's Abbey, which is Minnesota?
Minnesota, I believe, yeah.
Minnesota, I believe. And then I wouldn't mind also seeing the IBM Lago in France would be pretty cool. That's a pretty cool building. It'd be fun to just do a tour of all his architecture,
Yeah.
The Bauhaus would like to go to.
Yeah, would love to go to the Bauhaus, obviously. And then there is that building in Hartford, New Haven, that he designed that was the Armstrong building, and it's now a hotel.
The Hotel Breuer.
Yeah. I wouldn't mind going there. That'd be cool.
Oh, yes. I was just there a couple weeks ago.
Oh, were you?
It's pretty fantastic.
Yeah. We used to drive by it all the time when we were going to my grandmother's.
It was the Armstrong Rubber Company and then Pirelli and then IKEA.
Oh.
Yeah, it was part of the IKEA complex next door.
Oh, I didn't know that. I knew the Armstrong and the Pirelli, but yeah, that's a cool building too.
Yeah, it really is amazing, particularly when you get up close to it, because it's a lot smaller than it looks in its photos.
Yeah, I just always saw it from a distance driving on the highway.
Yeah, it's right there off the interstate. Everybody can see it going by.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about the thing that people know you for, even though they don't know it, which is the chair. So how did the chair come about? When did your dad invent the famous chair?
Oh, that chair was in the 1925, something like that. I think it was in the 20s. Yeah. He had a designer, I think he must have been Dino Gavina, who worked for Knoll. And he decided to name his furniture instead of it being tubular chair with caning or numbers or whatever. And so he decided to name that the Cheska chair.
And you were how old then?
I think I was about 12, maybe. Something like that. Maybe even a little younger, 11 or 12. And they came out to film things in the house. And somehow I got roped into, as you can tell by my very disgruntled face.
The picture of you in that chair is like, man, this is pissing me off, Dad.
I was not real excited to do it, but I did do it. So, and then it came out in a little pamphlet brochure, and
it was on magazines everywhere.
Yeah. And it was in our New Canaan house, just, the backdrop of the big windows and the yard. And we talk about, Gerald talks about that I should do a today picture sitting in the chair.
Oh, yeah. And that sweater you were wearing.
Yeah. And and post a then and now kind of thing.
That would be really cool.
Yeah, we should do that.
I'm sure that there are a lot of Breuer homeowners up that way that would love for you to do that in their houses.
Yeah.
After that chair came out and you did the ads, did people recognize you at that point? Did they say, oh, like you're the girl with the chair?
No, I never had anybody say that. I mean, obviously my parents' friends all knew it, but none of my friends could have cared whether I was sitting on the chair or not.
After your dad passed away, what happened to the business that he ran, the practice itself? Were you involved in that in any way, or with the designs that he had handled all those years?
No, he just had his partners that he'd had for a lot of years that just continued to take over the business and keep it running.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long did the practice last?
Gosh, I don't know if it isn't still going to some degree. I mean, most of the partners, I think, have passed away at this point.
Beckard left the firm in 1982, which was renamed Gachi Papa Christou Smith?
Yes, Ham Smith, Kitchen Papa Christou, yeah.
And it dissolved in 1986.
Oh, okay, yeah.
There have been so many books and a couple of movies and documentaries about your dad that have come out. Have people tried to find you for that?
I don't know, because they're going through my brother all the time first. And he is not very open to, how do I want to say, discussing and dealing with the past with our father. And so I do think people probably have tried, but he's the middleman, and it kind of gets stopped there. So we would love to be more involved. It's just how to get myself out there.
Okay.
For people to work with me instead of my brother.
So what can you share about your dad that most people don't know? He passed away now about 42 years ago, so I know it's been a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But what can you share about him with our listeners? What was he like?
He was quiet. He wasn't a real loud or super talkative person, I don't think, except more so with his peers and, when they had company over to the house and stuff like that. But with the family, he was definitely more quiet and reserved, I would say, just that European background is, so different than Americans.
More restrained, more polished.
Yes, exactly. And he was gone a lot of the time. So it wasn't like having a dad home every night or every weekend, or even in the summer, he would only come up once every couple of weeks and stay for a few days and then go back to the city. So his work was definitely his life, for sure.
There have been so many books and documentaries about him. Which ones have you seen that you think captured your dad and what you remember about him?
Gosh, the one that Isabel Hyman did was pretty accurate. And I haven't read a lot of them, but I'm still learning things about him that I read that I didn't necessarily know about. So it wasn't like he sat down and poured out his life to us, Right. And same with Mom. It was the era. They were definitely more private, shall I say?
Yes.
Yeah.
And your mom lived until about 2002. Is that right?
Yeah, about that. Yes.
I know your dad is buried at the Wellfleet House. Is your mom there as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Underneath the bench. The bench got moved, I think, from New Canaan. I remember it being in New Canaan, and they moved it to Wellfleet. And then their ashes are buried under the Noguchi bench, which has an inscription on the top that was in my father's writing that said something about, here I fell in Hong Kong or something and broke my knee because he fell down a manhole or something like that. And so that's what's written on the top of the bench.
Okay. Well, I know that preservationists throughout the world are really happy that the Cape Cod Trust is mounting a campaign to both buy the house and fix it up and restore it.
Restore it.
And I understand that it is pretty much like it was in 1981, all of your dad's and mom's belongings and personal items that were there are still there.
Yes, as far as I know.
Have not been moved.
No. And Tom doesn't go up there anymore. So it's somewhat of a museum, I guess I would say, inside.
It's a time capsule, really.
Yeah, it's a time capsule that, better put. But we're hoping to be able to get in there and maybe retrieve some belongings. I don't know. It sounds like Cape Cod Modern wants everything, including what's inside. But we would like to be able to go there and take some things.
I'm sure they would work with you.
Yeah.
Once you can establish a direct connection.
Right. Yeah. So
we'll see about that.
Yeah. We're going to be working on that currently, because once Tom gets something in his head, there's no change in his mind. So
perhaps after the fact, when they take it over, it'll be less of an issue.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. But no, I'm happy that it's not going to be destroyed. And I think it's wonderful that they can do that, restore it and keep the woods,
Yeah, the photos of it are really beautiful still.
Yeah. No, it's a fabulous location, and, just the way it's set up there and with all the ponds, and it's very pretty.
Francesca, I just want to thank you for chatting with me. This is a real privilege, and I know our listeners will enjoy it. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
That was George's conversation with Francesca Breuer Wallace. Finnish architect Alvar Aalto is regarded as the most influential architect of Nordic modernism. Forget New York. If you can make heads turn in Helsinki, you can make it anywhere. The completion of the 1929 Paimio Sanatorium vaulted him to world attention, and the opening of his Finnish pavilion at the 1939 New York World's Fair was described by Frank Lloyd Wright as a work of genius. Alvar Aalto was married to Aino Aalto, an established architect in her own right, and her contributions, like many women of that time, are overlooked or erroneously attributed to her husband. Heikki Aalto-Alanen is the grandson of Aino and Alvar Aalto. He's been vice chairman of the Alvar Aalto Foundation and has held many other positions maintaining Aino and Alvar Aalto's artistic heritage. A lawyer who has worked in the Nordic financial markets, he's recently served as the chairman of that sanatorium we mentioned earlier. It's Paimio, that's Paimio, which would be a good thing to Google right now.
It's beautiful.
He's the editor of the new book, Aino Alvar Aalto, A Life Together, featuring their previously unpublished correspondence from 1921 to 1949. Welcome, Heikki.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So, Heikki, you've been documenting and preserving your grandparents' legacy for a long time. How old were you when you realized that he was a big deal?
I think I was quite young, actually, because it was quite clear to me from early on, when I was a child, that when we visited Alvar at his home in Riihitie, it was something special. And I understood quite young that he was something special, a sort of an important person, so to say.
I know he was very well regarded in Finland, but over in America, he is really quite revered. People speak in such hushed tones about Aalto and the buildings he did not only here, but all around Finland.
Yeah, I think the 1939 New York's World's Fair was actually the thing that sort of launched his reputation in New York or in America.
What did the Finnish pavilion look like at the World's Fair?
Well, it's famous for its wall. It was called the Northern Light Wall, which was a kind of a curvy wall where all the pictures were hanged and so on. It was a really sort of a strange thing and extremely beautiful.
There's some wonderful photos of it actually on the web.
Yeah, exactly.
Heikki, how did Aino and Alvar meet?
They studied at the same time. Aino was 2 years older than Alvar, But at that time, the architecture school was quite small. So, I mean, everybody knew each other. So they met at the school. They didn't fall in love during their student days, but after Alvar had graduated, he established his own architecture studio in Jyväskylä, which was a small town in the central of Finland. And after a year or so, Aino moved to Jyväskylä to work for an office of another architect, but she started to do some work also for Alvar. Maybe because there was more work in Alvar's studio than in this other studio. And so they started to work together. And I think that they sort of fell in love working together. And that was the sort of a content of their whole life together, was sort of a love and work was very much sort of a combined.
Your new book about their letters to each other.
Yeah.
Were these letters love letters? Were they professional correspondence? What were they?
Well, they are sort of letters that people, married couple, write to each other when the other one is away. So my mother actually gave me these letters in the middle of the 90s. She had kept them. I mean, they were not given to the Aalto archives, Aalto Museum archives in Finland, but she had kept them herself. And at that point, I think that she thought that I would now be the one in the family who could sort of preserve these kind of things. And then I started to look at these letters, not at once, but gradually, and I sort of realized that there is a story here that I need to tell someday. And I wanted to tell them using the letters, to have them speak on their own voices, what kind of their life was during the times that they created these great buildings. But they speak about all the things that were going on in their life, not only work-wise, but also other things.
Architects of that time were very holistic.
Mm-hmm.
They were not only concerned with the buildings, but the landscape, the environment, the furniture, the music even that might be played in a building. How was that for the clients?
Of course, clients were different in that respect also. So, working with the Gulliksens, designing Villamairia was, of course, a bit different than designing, let's say, a hospital.
Yes. But he was trying to create an entire experience, not just a building.
Yeah, exactly. Gesamtkunstwerk, as it was called at the Bauhaus circles. So he wanted to sort of create a holistic place for a human being to be in. Not only that the architecture looks good, but it also feels good, and everything connected to it. He's trying to create a better place for man.
That's such a noble goal.
Yeah, exactly. It is. But it was at that point, I think. I think that today's architecture is actually lacking is this human perspective, that buildings should be planned for people and not these big wow effects.
Your family business was called Artec, and your grandmother was its first artistic director. What was that business about?
Well, that business was what they were trying to do were actually two things. First of all, they wanted to create a better way to export their furniture and also have some kind of a more organized way to sell it in the homeland also, because they had run into some troubles when they tried to export it to England, for example. But the other one was that they were trying to modernize Finland by sort of creating the first modern handicraft or industrial art business in Finland. They imported also a lot of things from Europe to be sold to Finns, not only to sell their own furniture, but to also modernize Finland aesthetically.
Did they run a store, a shop?
Yes, the first store was in Helsinki. And then, of course, they had agreements to sell it via other locations also. But the first store in Helsinki was established in 1936.
And your grandmother was the first managing director of Artec, and she's probably most well known, and I'm not going to say this correctly, Böljeblick tumblers?
Böljeblick, Yeah, she was not actually the first managing director. She was important for Artec to start with. She was the sort of artistic director. But the first managing director, Nils Gustav Hall, died in the war. And then during the war times, Aino became the managing director. And then she continued in that role after the war.
But these Böljebik tumblers, were these created by your grandmother?
Yes, you mean this glassware?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, they were created 1933 in a competition of the Karhula glassware factory.
And these are still sold, right?
These are still sold, like every glassware that Aino and Alvar designed. They are still sold. Today they are sold by Iittala in Finland, and they are exported all over the world.
And your grandfather, one of his most important contributions to design was in bent wood manufacturing. His plywood stacking stools, they are still everywhere.
They are, yes. They sold pretty well in America after the war. It's been said that they were the most sold foreign furniture in USA at the time. That's what I've heard. But then, when Aino died in 1949, I think that was sort of a turning point in many ways for Artec's business in USA, because it was more Aino's business. It was Aino's domain, so to say, more than Alvar's. And when Aino died very dramatically, or not dramatically, but very much too soon, then Alvar sort of lost his interest maybe to grow the sales.
To expand it, yes.
To expand it. So, he left it pretty much to others after Aino's death.
But it still continued, right, under Alvar?
Yeah, it still continues. Yes, Artec is still a very much living company. It's today owned by Vitra, the Swiss family business who, they sell all kinds of modern furniture all over the world, and it's a wonderful business. And I was actually really happy when Vitra bought Artec, and I think it's in good hands.
Yeah.
Today.
Now, the Paimio Sanatorium is considered an Aalto masterpiece.
Yes.
In America, sanatoriums are thought of as mental hospitals, but in Europe, they were just places to recover from serious illnesses. Is that right?
Yes, it was. Originally, it was to cure the tuberculosis, which was, at that point in the late 1920s, was a life-threatening disease. Before antibiotics were invented, quite often you died from it.
Could tuberculosis be cured by going to a well-designed building? Did that work?
Sometimes it worked. I guess often it didn't. But that was the only thing that at that time could be done. Just to have people breathe fresh air. And of course, there were all kinds of medications for that. But when there were no antibiotics, it was quite often you died for it. But
at least you'd be dying in a pretty place.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you've posted a photo of the Paimio armchair, which was designed as part of that project, and then manufactured for sale, and that was a big seller as well.
That was a big seller, yes. Artec wasn't established until 1936. So, by the time the Paimio Sanatorium was built and this furniture was being designed, there was no sort of organized way to export them. So the first ones were just sold. There was no sort of a business that were exporting them, but people who were interested in them needed to order them from the factory directly, and that didn't really work. But the first one to do that in a more manageable way was the British. There was an exhibition in Fortnum and Mason department store in 1933 called Wood Only, where these Paimio chairs and other furniture from bent wood were exhibited. And that led to the demand in England being quite good.
Besides this new book, there have been at least one major documentary about your grandparents coming out in the last few years. Were you involved in that?
You mean the Virpi Suutari film, Aalto?
Yes.
Yeah, I was, in a way, Virpi came to me when she was making that film, and she said to me that she had really problems getting close to these people, particularly Aino. She didn't sort of get the feeling of her, and her way of making documentaries is very intimate and personal, and she wants to sort of get to know the people. And then I said to Virpi that, yeah, I have these letters, and I mean, if you want to read these letters, that's okay for me. I can just give it to you to be read. And then she did that, and she later said to me that the moment that I dropped those letters to her in a boxes that they were in, and she started to read them, that was the moment that she sort of realized that now this film is going to be good. And she also did me the favor of scanning the letters. So it was, it was easier for me to write the book because I didn't have to take the letters in my hands and so on. They are quite fragile, actually, written in a sketching paper often and with a pen. So I didn't want to, with my sticky fingers, to sort of handle them too much. So it was easier for me that I could just use the computer and just read the letters.
It seems like this book that you're publishing now would be an excellent companion piece to people who've seen the documentary.
Yeah, I think this goes a little deeper than the documentary.
Okay, well, that's what books are supposed to do.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I felt, when I was writing the book, or when I started to write the book, of course, I didn't actually know what kind of book it will be, because that's what you have to do. You just have to start writing. And then when it came along and so on, and the book was finished, even then I didn't really sort of realize. But then with this process with Phaidon, when we looked at all the pictures, that there are much more pictures in this Phaidon book than in the Finnish edition, I sort of realized that, because most architecture biographies, or any biographies to that matter, are sort of written like outside looking in, and trying to make conclusions or explain things and like that. But what I wanted actually to do was to write this like inside looking out, as even like, this is the story that Aino and Alvar would tell. And using these letters, of course, it was possible to do that way, that their own voices are in this book.
The film is called Aalto, Architect of Emotions, and the book is called Aino and Alvar Aalto, A Life Together. Thank you so much, Heikki.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs. Okay, Tom, wrap us up.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 20,000 significant modernist houses, and access 4.2 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song was performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Kelly Policelli. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guile. George and I will be back soon with another Children of Genius edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.